Survivor specialists Phil and Alexa are back with another episode of our Survivor China rewatch. We are on episode 4, and no, that is not somebody from Survivor China at the bottom of your screen. We know that you had Leslie the last time. Tonight we are joined by one of our patrons, one of our top tier patrons, a Vaughn level. We have Morgan Jackson, who has been a patron for a really long time. I feel like you've been around for a while, right, Morgan?
The original.
Yeah, pretty close to a year now. I came on right before Winners at War started, so I wanted to get in with the power rankings, and I've been going strong ever since.
Came for the power rankings and stayed for the daily content when the power rankings were no longer.
Heck yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Daily content.
Hopefully that daily content is going to keep you all entertained. Alexa and I recorded our round 2 of our bracket challenge today, and man, was that fun. There were some really bad matchups in that second round, but we'll talk about that. That's for our patrons.
It's been keeping me busy, that's for sure. I always have something to listen to, which is great. So.
And that's great. That's what we're trying to do, and we're also trying to make it worthwhile, because obviously we can't have a power rankings game now. So anybody who's been following along, our last Disney podcast had another one of our patrons, Phil Conti, on. He was talking about the Lion King. He had a Simba doll that I thought was Nala. And now tonight we have Morgan. We're trying to make this as worthwhile, especially for our top tier patrons. You all give us the most money. And if you're not getting power rankings, you're kind of missing out on a lot of what you should be getting. Kind of the only perk that we really offer for the $20 patrons.
So really just sell it better. Why don't you?
I'm doing great here. I mean, you know what? We'll see how it goes. You're getting daily content, though, which is always good. But you're on here. You have to follow up Leslie. And Leslie gave great insight to like what it smelled like in China. She told us Todd was the worst smelling person out there, which blew my mind. Do you have any insight into who smelled really, really bad on this season?
I mean, if I had to guess, it would probably be Jean-Robert, just because he was wearing no underwear and always had wet jeans on. Which definitely like changed my perspective of how I viewed him after hearing that information. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to be near him. That would be my guess.
It sounds like you're pretty aligned with a lot of the other players who are on that tribe. Yes. From what we have watched, and especially from episode 4 too.
And the other thing that I thought, you know how he's always in the water for his confessionals? And Leslie was saying they would only let him take his jeans off if he went in the water. So now in my brain, like every time he's having a confessional, I'm like, he's probably naked right now. And it's like his only relief from his wet jeans.
I'm sure that actually, that's a really good point. I bet every bit of footage that we have of Jean-Robert out on the land is probably the only footage that exists of Jean-Robert not in the water.
Yes.
I am really disappointed that that's the first 3 minutes of this podcast, because I had never thought about the fact that Jean-Robert is probably naked.
This changes the whole season.
It really does. It changes everything. So he's probably naked in every single one of his confessionals, just hanging out in the water, and that just makes that makes all of his confessionals so much weirder. And now
I know, right?
I don't know.
The cameramen were like, all right, strip down and tell us about your day.
The cameramen were probably like, go get in the water. Give us a holler when you're finally naked and submerged, because we don't need that. But now I have to go back and listen to what he's saying and be like, nope, that's a naked confessional. Nope, yeah. He's still got the jeans on in that one. Wow, this is a new game. It's like one of those
things you like can't unsee once you see it. So
well, this is especially funny, because I think so when we talked to Leslie last week, she kind of gave a pretty good defense of Jean-Robert and said, what we saw was, certainly happened, but we had some really good talks, and he's actually very cerebral. And this episode was especially interesting because Jean-Robert whips out some Mandarin Chinese and is really, really elevates that reward that they win because he can communicate with the fishermen.
I had totally forgotten about that, actually.
Great reward.
Until I rewatched it. Yeah.
And that's the one thing I will always give Survivor. And I think that in the newer seasons, they've kind of started to one note a lot of the characters, which might be why we don't fall in love with the characters as much anymore. Or when we do, we fall head over heels for no apparent reason, such as Andrea, where we just can't get enough because they're just constantly being rammed down our throat as like this great, amazing, perfect person. And I have to trash Andrea whenever I can, but obviously she's fine. It's just, I feel like there's no depth a lot of times to these newer characters. We get like, this is what they're good. Nora's crazy. That's it. She's just crazy. There's nothing else there. Jean-Robert has been nothing but a sleazeball this entire season. He's been despicable. Nobody likes him. He's talking about James sleeping with him, with Courtney. He's making fun of Todd. He's calling back. But then all of a sudden we get him breaking out Mandarin. And he's actually one of the most useful people in this episode. And I feel like pretty much anybody who gets cast on Survivor, even Tommy Sheehan, has something interesting in his life. He's not just a teacher, okay? He's not just that. There is something interesting there behind the scenes, but they don't focus in on that stuff as much anymore. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they just shoot in Fiji. Because think about Mandarin Chinese isn't going to come up when you're in Fiji. And then you also had PG, who was talking about how emotional she was. Her grandfather had just died, all of those things. We're kind of missing that in the newer seasons. And I loved this from Jean-Robert, even though, like you, Morgan, I had totally forgotten about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we even see him like talking to the little kids and like, what's your name? And like, it's like this very endearing side of him. We don't get those two sides anymore. I feel like everything is so strategy heavy, which, I mean, obviously I love the strategy of the game, but we don't get those moments like we used to in the older seasons.
Right. And I think this reward, we've seen this already, especially in the premiere, but I think this reward kind of paves the way for how the rest of the season goes in terms of having culturally relevant rewards and even the challenges too. The immunity challenge where they are throwing maces at each other, which would definitely not happen in prison.
Yeah. Has there ever been like a costume wearing?
I loved it.
I feel like this is the only one in all of Survivor where they have to wear something funny like that.
There are those ones in like the Dark Ages where they have to like paint themselves and put on like weird hula stuff. But this one, like you said, Morgan, like they're putting on full on gear and they look pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I had two thoughts the entire time with this. One, it started to feel a little Big Brothery, which they definitely didn't want to do. So I think
thought
that's why
that
they
too,
stopped.
actually.
But number
Is that a Big
two,
Brother thing, like campy,
putting on costumes, yeah, like
really?
funny costumes,
Oh,
yeah.
God. I clearly know nothing about Big Brother.
and then two, all I could think of was Samwise Gamgee and Frodo in Lord of the Rings in the third one, when they're running around in the little costumes with the obnoxiously large noses so they blend in with the orcs. That is literally what they all looked like.
Oh my gosh.
And
that is hilarious. Except
like,
James, who like legitimately looks like he's like an ancient warrior.
He looks exactly like the people who probably actually wore those costumes in battle.
Yes, exactly.
He looked like something straight out of Gladiator. I mean, if you watch the movie Gladiator, he looks like he could have been in the ring fighting with them, and I would have been like, yeah, he's a gladiator. Like when he wins that and he goes walking off, I'm like, he looks like he could kill someone right now with his bare hands in that outfit, if you will, in his little uniform. So no, it was interesting, and this is the second time too. And we're already jumping immunity challenge, but whatever. This is the second time too that they do a weird editing thing in this season, and it kind of bothers me because
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Karate chop slow-mo.
Well, that's what they were doing. The karate chop slow-mo was in the last episode, but in this one, it's the stupid spinning ball where they like zoom in on it, and I'm like, is this like a cartoon cut screen or like that 70s show cut screen? Like, what am I looking at here that's making this happen?
I'm loving it. We didn't talk about it last week, but I think it is so unnecessary, but it makes it so unbelievably funny too, because it feels like very cartoony.
I love those like weird editing things that totally date shows or movies or whatever, where it's like, that was probably like super cool at the time when it came out. And then you watch it now and you're like, okay, like, what is this that I'm watching?
Were we like really amped up when that happened? We probably were.
Yeah.
But the fact that I don't think it happens again the rest of the season.
No, we weren't.
I don't think it happens again the rest of the season, which is why I think the reaction might have been very bad towards it, because I don't think that we get it again. And that was back-to-back episodes, and like the slow motion karate chops. I understand why they did that one, because it was to show like Courtney literally has to like saw through it.
Did they show Courtney's though? I don't think they did, because I don't know if she gave a full slap.
She didn't go in slow motion. Remember, she had to chop it.
She couldn't cut it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just hit the string with the knife.
And so that's why I think they wanted to do that one. But this one, like, it just was weird looking. And like, it really was just like awkward, and I'm glad they don't do this again. But I do somebody said in the chat, John Millsap said, but this challenge epitomizes why China's challenges are great. They all brought in the Chinese culture. And that's the one thing I do miss. Maybe they don't need to dress up in uniforms. Maybe they don't need to be slow motion on pretty much. It's the ladder ball game is pretty much what I got from this.
Even like we had a challenge at night. I mean, when's the last time that we had a challenge at night?
Right. It was like a tribal council challenge too, which is always cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know why. I mean, I know why they stopped doing those. A night challenge is always going to be more expensive than a daytime challenge, which just because of the crew and production and all of that, you got to just bring in so much extra stuff for that. But that was an epic challenge. And especially to be a reward. Normally when they have something at Tribal Council, it's almost always an immunity challenge. And for this to just be a reward challenge with the fireworks going off and all of that, I thought that was really, really cool.
Hey, Ian Dean just gave you a call out. He said, I wish we got more in-depth moments exploring the players' lives a little more. Also, hi, Morgan. Thanks for the $5.
Hello, Ian.
Morgan, we will give you some of this $5.
We'll give you $1.67.
We'll give you $1.
Yeah, you will get $1. See, we are very fair here. If you can get on the podcast and get people to drop hundreds of dollars or $5, you will get. I guess that's a little bit less than a third. No, that's a third. Wow, I did that in my head.
Is it? It felt like less.
That was good math.
And you're a math teacher, right?
I am a math teacher.
How impressed are you that I just divided 5 by 3 in my head?
Yes.
Pretty darn impressed.
There you go. So anybody who's listening who is a student of Morgan's, I just outsmarted all of you. And I don't know what grade they are.
I did tell my students that I was going to be on YouTube today.
Were they excited? Were they nervous?
Yes. They were not nervous, but they listened to my Survivor talk. So. And in fact, this year, so because of everything COVID related, we actually have to have kids eat in our classroom. They don't go to the cafeteria and eat. So my kids are watching Survivor at lunch. None of them have ever watched Survivor before. And we actually started, so we have A days and B days. So my A kids are watching Survivor China. And they loved Chicken. They were like, oh my gosh, Chicken is the best. If he gets voted out, I'm going to be pissed. We're not going to watch this anymore. And I'm just like, great. but now they're totally on the James train. And my other group's watching Token Teens. So they're enjoying it.
2 great seasons. Well, that's perfect for your A group because we're talking about an episode that they've probably seen.
Exactly. Yes.
Wow. What grade do you teach?
High school.
Okay.
Hello, high school.
So I'm inspiring the new generation of Survivor fans. That is my true calling.
Well, and I was in high school when I watched Survivor China, and I too can say I had the same exact reaction as Chicken was my guy. It shifted to James, and I'm telling all of you, by the end, Courtney will be your person. It will be. There will be a moment where you're sitting there watching the reunion, and you're like, is Courtney the greatest player of all time? And then it'll click. Because me and my friend, this was back when we had.
Don't spoil it for them.
No, I just said she was in the reunion. Okay. Alexa, everybody's in the reunion. Alexa.
You're right. Well, yes, correct.
This was back when we had the flip dinosaur phones. And I remember me and my friend, we were the only 2 people who watched Survivor. And I remember pulling out the flip phone and having to hit like the 900 times, like you have to do that because it didn't even like get smart where like it would spell out Courtney. But I think I texted him and I was like, is Courtney like our favorite player? And then he was just like, yeah, why do I like her so much more now? And then the next day in school, we were like, why did we not realize all season long how great she was? Why did it take until the reunion? So it will click for all of you, but it won't be until the reunion. And I don't know what it is.
She probably gives Jeff some lip, like more lip than usual. And maybe that helps.
It also helps. She's unbelievably attractive at that reunion, but hey, just saying.
There are high school
real reason.
Yeah, no, it's because of her personality, which is amazing. And in this episode, Courtney gets yelled at by Jean-Robert. And I want to hear both of your takes on this because obviously I'm coming from the man perspective. And so I don't know about this moment. What did we all think about this Jean-Robert Courtney moment?
My instant thought was it was like they're like an old married couple. That was the interaction in my mind. It was like they've tried to have this conversation before where it's like, Jean-Robert is trying to help Courtney with something that she doesn't want or need help with. And she's trying to explain that to him in a way that's not going to make him upset. And I would have to say I'm on Courtney's side in this scenario. Maybe it is because I'm a woman, but I don't know.
I have a few things here. First of which is that JK Clumsy just sent us $2 and I don't know what to do with those. Hopefully
it's like 167 or 177 or something like that. We don't get as much, but it's still
okay,
counts.
Great. So, but thank you so much. I'm with Morgan on that. I think this, like you said earlier, Phil, all we've been shown so far is the sleazeball Jean-Robert is. So we are going into this argument with, okay, we have big mean Jean-Robert and Courtney, who is now 6 pounds and probably can't. I forget what he was. Yeah, she gets skinnier by the minute. I forget what exactly he was trying to help her with, but I felt like that was a conversation that was just never should have happened.
Here's how I look at it. So in this moment, he was trying to prevent her from touching a hot pot, which I honestly believe that in this moment, Jean-Robert was caring. I feel like he was seriously concerned. He was like, don't touch that because it's going to burn your hand. And I think he was very, very concerned for her. However, we then see later in the episode when James starts getting mad at Jean-Robert, when Jean-Robert is literally just translating and James is still getting aggravated by Jean-Robert.
Around.
And so I think it comes down to the fact of, in this moment, I didn't particularly find it to be overly aggressive. I did think he meant it in a concern, but we also saw that one moment, and I can guarantee that there were about 25 more of them in the 30 minutes leading up to that moment that drove Courtney absolutely insane, and her constantly having to say, please stop, please stop, please stop, please stop. Because if James is getting mad over him translating, I can only imagine what Jean-Robert had been saying to Courtney that was left off screen by this point.
Yeah, I think we're shown, I think for every like true concern that Jean-Robert has, we're also clearly seeing him being more combative at other times. So it's sort of like if you have a mortal enemy and for once they're like, oh no, I actually want to do this to help you. You almost don't believe them. So you automatically put up the wall.
Well, and I think you also have, like, everybody has somebody in their life that just like really annoys them. And it's like every time they do something, no matter what it is, it's like irritating, So I feel like people are probably at that point with Jean-Robert where it's like, even though he's doing something like neutral or even helpful, like it's like, gosh, Jean-Robert, just like get off my case. What's wrong with you?
Right.
Like, he can't win at this point. He's dug himself too far.
Phil, when you mentioned a Courtney moment, I had a different favorite Courtney moment this episode. It was when Dave gets rescued. The poor guy needs a break. Dave gets kidnapped and he's trying to get to know the tribe. And he goes, Courtney, where are you from? And she goes like, I'm a New York City waitress. And he goes, I love that place. And he's like, it's New York. It's like not that great.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Morgan.
What I loved about when Dave got kidnapped, it was like right away, Dave's like going around hugging everybody. And James is like, what have I told you about the hugging thing? Like, and I'm like, what has happened in this like 24 hours that Dave has been there that James is like, what have I told you about hugging me? Like,
how much touching was going on that? Because I wrote the same thing. I told you about the hugging, James, today, because Dave goes up to hug him, and you can tell that that's not James being like, hey, man, stop. That's like, okay, this is the 20th time I've told you this. If you touch me again, we're going to have a problem. And it's so funny because, like, James is deadpan always. I mean, that's what everybody loves about James is that he just doesn't hold back and everything is just so straightforward. But what was Dave doing? And then the rest of the time, we see him weirdly hugging everybody. I mean, even Todd, when he's like, do you believe in whatever? And he just like slaps him on the shoulder in the weirdest shoulder hug of all time. Like, it's all just very, very bizarre. Very, very. Dave's a weird guy.
Dave is so weird. And that is just so accentuated in this episode, which makes sense because it's his boot episode. But we get like a very happy-go-lucky version of Dave. I think because we get a very like angry versus Sharia moment. But man, Dave is a trip this episode. Leo Laura sent us Australian money and said we better share it with Morgan. So Morgan, you're about to get a fact.
Yeah.
All
right.
I don't know what Australian money translates to.
Is it? I don't know what's Australian. I just assumed because of the A.
Yeah. What does the A mean? Let's put it up there and see.
All right, Leo Loris, hit us up. But anyways, Dave is so good. Why do you guys think they took Dave? Do you think they knew there was tension?
I think they took Dave because they knew he was doing everything for that tribe. Because they definitely had talked about it. Leslie had definitely seen it. So Leslie had definitely come back and said that to all of them. Jamie had probably mentioned something about it when she was kidnapped. And I just think, like, at that point, you know he's going to eat, but you also know that if he's not there, the rest of the other tribe probably isn't going to eat at all. And if they're not going to eat at all, that's how you want to keep them, because Dave's not very strong, which is sad because he might be the second strongest person on that tribe. And I'm talking behind Sharia. Not behind, I don't know, Frosty maybe, but Frosty's like more
Frosty's
like
nimble. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just think they wanted to weaken the tribe. And I think weakening them by taking Dave was the best move. And they probably also knew Dave was just going to run his mouth 100 miles an hour and they were going to get every single detail they possibly could need.
Yeah.
I almost wonder if they decided that they were going to vote Dave out while he was kidnapped. Like they were like, man, it's way nicer when he's not here. Let's just vote him out. I mean, obviously in the edit, they make it seem like they're deciding between Sharia and Dave, but who knows what actually went down, you know?
Yeah. And from that edit, the Sharia argument felt so kind of forced. It felt like they were saying, like, well, if you had to vote out someone else, who would you go with? And Eric's like, I guess Sharia. But I'm with you, Morgan. I think that is when they made the decision.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting, too, because we started off the episode right away with the Jean-Robert Courtney incident. And then we went straight to Dave and Sharia arguing and the whole shell incident. And I just thought it was interesting that we had that like kind of parallel scenario happening on both tribes.
Yeah, and I think it says a lot about how this season works out. And I'm not saying that the women are underdogs, but the women on this season are kind of being viewed as underdogs. PG, Courtney, even Amanda up to this point. Leslie was an underdog. Denise, Sharia. Like, it just feels like the women are being viewed as more of the underdogs on this season. And considering how this season goes, and everybody who's in Morgan's class, pause for 10 seconds. Considering how the underdogs do ultimately end up finding their way deep into the game, that's where I'll put it. I think that this is kind of the setup for that, because as it happens, these people who think they're in the power position actually aren't in the power position. I think what the edit was doing, Dave was always going to vote for Sharia. And the one nice thing for every single confessional that came out was that every single one that mentioned that Dave was annoying was also going to have to mention Sharia, which makes it easy for the editors to just be like, it's Sharia or Dave. Come on, she's laying around. She's saving it up. And Sharia, unlike Jamal, who we've had on the podcast, and like he was like, I was not laying around. I was not doing all, like, everybody takes it like, what do you do? Sharia is just coming out and being like, I'm saving my energy. I'm doing nothing. I want to do nothing. So we knew it was real, but also it makes it easy on the editors to kind of give an adversary to Dave because her name was coming out of every single person's mouth.
Well, and speaking of the shell incident, which, is crazy in and of itself, but like, when's the last time we had like just an absurd, like, interaction like that on any season? I don't know.
And again, like, this goes back to, just because Jamal's on my brain now, Jamal and Jack, they have their moment in season 39, which is that very, like, emotional moment with the do-rag and all of that, and how Jamal takes that and how he uses it as like a teaching moment for Jack, and he's playing. That is now like, but that's like a serious thing. Like, that is a very serious, transcends into real life. We don't we'll get those moments on Survivor now, but we don't get these goofy, ridiculous adults acting like 7-year-olds moments on Survivor anymore. And I kind of look, I'm all for, the Jamal Jack type conversations. There's certain conversations I think Survivor goes too far, but that is something that I think was important. But when you go to like what's happening with Sharia and Dave, I feel like nowadays they skip those things. Unless somebody's dumping fire or dumping rice on the fire, they don't really point to these like crazy, unexplainable, you're not thinking straight moments anymore. They'll just gloss over them, and then we'll hear about it in the exit interviews. But this moment is so pathetic, and it bothers me so much, because what does Dave say? I just wanted to take some shells home for my mother.
Yes.
And you're like, I hate this guy. But also, he just wants his mom to be happy. And you're just like, what am I watching? It feels, I had such secondhand embarrassment. I couldn't.
Yes.
The original
that's
context.
exactly what I was going to say.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts my feelings. And look, again, so now I'll open it up to both of you again. Who do you side with on this one between Sharia and Dave and the Shells?
I feel like I can't side with either of them. They're both
debate as old as time.
What'd you say, Alexa?
So childish.
Debate as old as time. I don't know. They're both being really childish. I think at this point in the show, I much prefer Sharia. So I lean towards Sharia. I also was more like in Dave's many spats with his cohorts, I usually have been taking the other person's side. So I generally was leaning more towards Sharia.
J.K. Clumsy brings up a good point. Are you telling me that Nora hiding Dean's shoes isn't a 7-year-old childlike move?
I forgot.
Great point. I had totally
That is
forgotten.
true. That's a great point.
Spat. Like the only like recent spat I can think of is like Carl versus Elizabeth in David versus Goliath over the bamboo too thick or something like that.
Her back,
That was really passive aggressive. This was just like getting in it.
Actually, there was like between Debbie and Brad Culpepper and Game Changers. That
pissed.
was
She just screams at the camera.
Frustrating, and I'm pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but again, like I think so. This is one where with the Courtney one, I do ultimately take Courtney's side. I just think Jean-Robert in that moment was meaning to be generous and comes out as an ass because he's made himself an ass the entire time. But in this one, I do side with Dave here. However, I understand Sharia's plan. And Sharia's plan was, you have driven me up a wall. We are playing a game for $1 million. Please lay a hand on me. And she even says that here.
Yeah.
She says, I want you to touch me. Because what she wants and what she's hoping, I don't think Survivor would have done it, because at the end of the day, like he wasn't going to hit her or physically do anything. If anything, it would have just been like a grab on the arm of like, give me those back. But she was trying to get him booted from the game here.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
That's some serious.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah. That's what she wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. But to Sharia's, I mean, for what it's worth, her resting game is working because she is carrying that team on her. Like she's carrying that tribe on her back in the challenges.
I really have a hard time with like the lazy people, because that's just like not how I operate. I feel like if I were out there, that's what would drive me crazy. So that's why I have a hard time being on Sharia's side, because that also, like, if I were living with her, I would be annoyed and pissed that she's just laying in the shelter all day too. So I can see like both sides. Both sides there.
Here's my question to you. Do you think that there's a limit to the amount of work, though? Like, do you think Dave is too much on this season with his constant doing stuff? Or do you think that he's just on the wrong tribe and actually he's, he was doing a normal amount?
I think the majority of the time he is really annoying. Like there was like an incident with PG in one of the earlier episodes where they're like arguing about where to put the fire. I can't even remember what it was. And it's like, okay, Dave, you're being annoying. And he probably was working too hard. But I don't know. I guess it's so hard to know without actually being out there,
And it's tough too, because neither one of them, Morgan's class, cover your ears, neither one of them go very far. And so I mean, obviously Dave goes home in this episode, but it's also hard to play Sharia up as a huge hero or anything of the sort, because Jean-Robert needs to be multifaceted, because Jean-Robert doesn't go away for a little bit, whereas Sharia, because she's barely there for that much longer, it's hard to like really give her a much better edit, because I don't remember exactly why she's voted out when she is voted out, but I think the reasoning might be like, she's not doing much around camp,
Well,
ultimate.
doesn't she get swapped to the other tribe?
Yeah.
And ends up going home because of
and
that.
they like Frosty more. I think that's really what it comes down to, but they needed to give some sort of reasoning.
He catches them finding the idol.
Morgan's kids, I hope you watched this far.
They have. We've made it to the merge, so
so we can make more references.
Yes,
I've been trying not to do that. Okay, so Sharia, because Sharia goes home in 11th.
We can speak freely. They'll survive.
Because she's the 11th. Well, they all said they have access to the internet. I'm sure they can figure it out if they want to.
Yeah. So because she gets 11th, and we see this time and time again in Survivor. And I also think it's something, and I keep going back to him, but he, like I said, he's just on my brain. He just, he's in my mind. But Jamal is another one. Like, he gets a bad edit early on, and then as it starts to pick up, it never gets great because he doesn't get that far in the game. You know what I mean? Like, if you have somebody like Chris Doherty, you need to edit them positively because they go so far. Courtney, another one, you have to pick her edit up, because she goes far in the game. And if you haven't watched Survivor and you haven't seen this season, just know that the smallest person generally does very well if they can make the merge. So Courtney does pretty well. But when you they have to change the edit around on that person. PG, another one, horrible start. They're talking about how she could go home first, all of that. She wants to be the leader, whatever. But you slowly start to see it happen. They don't really have to do that for Sharia. And I think that's ultimately why they're more willing to kind of toss her to the side and be like, she can be Dave's adversary and then she'll just go home.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's how I feel about that. Okay. What else? Okay. Reward challenge on this one. We talked about it a little bit. What did you all think about the fact that they had to use giant chopsticks and a flaming ball?
I loved that. I mean, again, we've talked about this, but when have we ever had a challenge where one person holds a huge chopstick, there's a fireball, and then when you win, you get fireworks in front of this beautiful Chinese temple? It's crazy. The fireworks at the end were so extra. I loved it.
I think it was cool, because it is so different and we haven't ever seen anything like it again. But I also wonder if the challenge ultimately was just who was less bad at moving the ball across the distance. You know what I mean?
Because it's not a skill. Also, if anybody's ever held two chopsticks with their one in each hand, that is difficult. And those are 7 inches and not your entire body being used to carry it. So that actually looks legitimately difficult.
Yeah. I just imagine in real life, that challenge took an hour to do, and they were just dropping it every 6 inches until they finally made it to the end.
Right. And there's a reason why we don't see a challenge like this again. And obviously this is a very China heavy challenge, but it's obnoxious. It's so tedious. And really, as a viewer, I found myself more frustrated than excited watching that challenge because I'm like, oh my God, just pick it up, just pick it up, just pick. That's not an easy thing to make happen at all. So yeah, I was very frustrated for everybody involved. James and Jean-Robert are working together great. Jean-Robert saying they're impossible and James yelling at him to just shut up and focus. I just love James is just so blunt over and over and over again. And yet he's such a
he gets away with it. He's so endeared because of it.
And that's what's so funny because this might be a bad take, but if you actually just directly look at what he says, he has not said a single nice thing to anybody, yet everybody loves him.
Yeah.
It's like Rudy. It's very similar to Rudy.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I never really thought about
that. That's a great comparison.
Yeah. I was just watching the episode 1 of All Stars because Phil and I are doing this episode bracket, but Jeff is trying to engage Rudy before a challenge and he gives him nothing. Mm-hmm. And you just laugh because his inflection is so matter of fact. And Sue's drinking the unboiled water and Jeff's like, Rudy, what's your take? Rudy, what's your take? And he's like, it's a bad idea. And everyone thinks it's hilarious.
And I think that's what people fell in love with about James and then what they will start to fall in love with about Amanda because Amanda's game really starts to pick up in the next episode and things really start to change. Somebody had said, I hope Phil says that she's invisible because he's 3 for 3 on it. So it's obligatory. And you know what? She's invisible still. So there you go. 4 for 4. But I think what people fall in love with about them is they're not trying to be reality TV stars. And I think that's something that we forget about nowadays. Look, there's a lot of people who are generally just fans of Survivor that love the game, that really want to play. Adam Klein never wanted to be a reality TV star. Tommy Sheehan is not a reality TV star. But there are a lot of players now, and especially in the mid-20s, early 20s through like the mid-20s, and then still in the 30s, who are like, opportunity to be on TV. This is great. I can't wait. I'm going to blow up my brand, and then I'm going to sell products because of my facial care or whatever it's called. And they're like, look at me. This is what I do now. That's different than what we saw back then. James wanted to just win the game, and he's just such a competitive dude that it was like, get out of my way because I'm going to win this. And Amanda wasn't trying to milk it to the cameras. And there's something refreshing about that because – you know, for every Jean-Robert, you need a James, you need an Amanda. And that's why I always say the Gary Hogaboom, Brendan Shapiro, that type of old man character who a lot of people will be like, oh my God, they're so boring. I'm like, no, that needs to be on every season because it's somebody I can see myself in, which who watched this season and goes, I'm Jean-Robert? Nobody. It doesn't happen.
Yeah. Did you watch that season and think I'm James, Phil?
I was a little bit more muscular than James when I was in high school, so
that makes sense.
I was running back then, so I probably could have beaten James up back then for sure. I'm not worried about that. Definitely.
I mean, quick sidebar. You mentioned Amanda was kind of quiet. Todd's pretty quiet too, even though Todd had. This is really like the last part of the episode we even really talked about. Todd gets his now third idol clue, and I think this is a really cool moment. I think this is Phil. You made point of this is when Dave really gives him a weird shoulder rub. And he asks Todd how long he's been watching the show. And Todd's like, since day one, I've been a fan of this forever. And that was really cool because that's something that's now just so implicit in who gets cast in Survivor. Everybody's a huge fan. So it's really cool that Todd was just so passionate about it.
I think one of the things too, I mean, in the first seasons, like reality TV wasn't really a thing until Survivor was on TV, you know, and in these older or in the newer seasons, I should say, like everybody who's on these new seasons has grown up watching reality television. They know what it looks like for somebody to be on reality television. Whereas in the first 10, maybe even 20 seasons, like people still don't really understand what does it mean to be on reality TV. And the way that they're going to behave is different now than they would have 10, 15 years ago.
It's so meta now because now it's, oh God, what is Twitter going to think of me? Like I shouldn't say Instagram,
or like playing for the Sia money. Like that's a thing.
Exactly.
And I always say this now, the problem with Survivor is most of the players come out to play a second time.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of times we aren't happy with the winners. Chris Underwood, Tommy Sheehan, Nick Wilson. I'm trying to keep going back, like not so much Wendell because so skip Wendell, go skip Sarah because it was her second time, but like Michelle, when you start looking at a lot of these first time winners, the reason that we don't love them as much as the older winners, the reason Adam and Michelle get crapped on throughout the community is because they're there to win the game. They're not there to entertain you. They don't care if you enjoyed watching them play. They don't want you to be happy. They want to win the $1 million. And I think that's been lost as time has gone on because a lot of people see an opportunity to become famous. And or they see an opportunity. I played once, now I play twice, now I play 3 times. I can keep doing it. Eventually I'll make enough money that it'll be like, okay, so what? I played 3 times. I made $300,000 instead of making $1 million. Whatever. I got the experience. I'm essentially a reality TV star now. I think that that's something that people really want nowadays. Look, I'm the same. I've always loved Survivor, but if I got on, I'm like, what would that do for my life? That would be awesome. And so when you have to think about it that way, I don't know, it's just different. It's unique. So that's what I got about that. I forget why I even went on that tangent. I just was excited.
Oh, we were talking about how Todd said he was a huge fan, and then we went down a whole thing. But even though Todd has this pivotal moment, this isn't a big Todd episode. This is a really big Dave and Jean-Robert episode. Dave also has, this is like the last note that I have. Dave has this ridiculous quote when he comes back to camp and he goes, I bet they can't, it's something like, they spent a day and a half away from me and my slave driving ability.
Mm-hmm.
And then he rolled his eyes. Like, that is just a wild thing to say.
I don't think he was as not self-aware as we all think. I think he was
pretty goony.
I think he knew that like he wasn't doing well. But I also think that he just thought, look, I'm working my ass off. How can you get rid of me? Because this was kind of on that precipice of, if you were worked hard, you survived through the pre-merge. Like, that's just how it was back, up until probably season 19 when Russell really turned that on its head. So I think that was kind of like something that, kind of goes missed here. I do want to talk a little bit though about Dave choosing Todd, because, Alexa, you had brought that up. Todd is now chosen by everybody. And I think this is what's so amazing about Todd as a player. And I want one of those clap emoji things where it's like, Todd is the, because Todd is the greatest one-time player in the history of the show. And like, I know a lot of people will argue that, but he is the greatest one-time player in the history of the show because of things like this. He has convinced everybody in his own tribe that he is sneaky, but harmless. Don't worry about him. He'll work with you. He's now convinced everybody on Jean Who that you don't have to worry about Todd, because you can give him the idol and all of that and all of these clues and everything great. And because he knows the game so well, he'll actually help you move further in the game. When in reality, it was kind of part of his idea to get rid of Leslie because she knew too much. She had all the information. So Todd is just the greatest. I love that he got this. And I also love what it sets up coming up in the next 2 episodes, of course.
Well, I don't know if either of you saw the Art of War quote that was on the clue. Did you guys read that?
No, I didn't see that.
He didn't say it out loud, but it showed the clue. And I never noticed it before, but it said, before making an alliance with a neighbor, be sure to know his intentions, which I thought was very fitting, obviously, because of the nature of the clue and everything. But I don't know. I just thought that was cool.
I also love you showing us up and reading the clues.
You took your good notes.
Yes.
But it's funny you mention that, because Todd is really the only player so far who has referenced the Art of War. Like, he's the one who you see like 2 or 3 times, like actually reading it and saying, oh, maybe we should, like, I think it's like in the premiere, the 2nd episode, like, oh, we should read the book because maybe that will help us with one of these challenges. And this just shows that Todd is thinking, 10 steps ahead of everybody else.
Yeah.
And then Aaron reads everybody a bedtime story in his nice soothing voice. That's what ends up happening. No, yeah, he's on a different level. And I don't think people realize, because his cast is so good. I mean, every single one of these people deliver on this season. And again, it goes back to, I don't think any of them wanted to be reality TV stars. Maybe Jean-Robert, but other than that, I don't think any of them wanted to be. But they all still bring it. And this is the Denise coming out party. Denise has been invisible for the first 3 episodes, and she is huge in this. She's not very good with food because she's a lunch lady, but
like from the second she starts talking, it's like, oh my gosh, how can you like not love her? She's just like, she's one of those people where it's like, if I were out there playing with her, I'd be like, it's so cool that I get to like meet you, because our paths would never cross in real life, and you're just this really cool person. And I don't know. I just think that's a really cool thing about the show too, is that it brings different people together. And I know Leslie talked about that a lot too last week. But.
Yeah. And Denise is we never see anybody like Denise again. And it's so funny because she becomes such a pivotal player, and it's crazy to see how long it takes. I know the confessional count wasn't really a thing at this point in Survivor, but did she get 2 confessionals before this? She was not a part of this season.
I wrote Denise's first confessional ? I couldn't remember if she even had one before.
She has
coming out party ?
At episode 1, she has it when they're in the temple, because she's talking about how amazing that is and how as like a lunch lady, she never gets anything like that. But I don't know if she gets anything else in episodes 2 or 3. And then in this episode, she really like blows. I mean, she has like 4 or 5 confessionals. I love her. Of course, it's about food, because she's talking about, we take the chicken nuggets out of the freezer and we give them to the kids. And I'm like, you don't cook those? Or no, she said we put them in the oven. Never mind. I was like, you put them in the oven? You don't just microwave those? Like, get out of here. Don't lie to me.
That's a high-end school that she served at.
Yes, exactly. Not like the ones that I went to. But yeah, it's very we're finally starting to see everybody come into their own. And that is what I like about this season, is that all 16 of them are big roles on this season. Even Eric and Frosty, who are a little bit quieter, big roles. And it all really starts to come to a head.
I also felt like Frosty, even though he didn't play a huge role in the episode, I felt like we could see that he actually does have like good gameplay and like an ability to talk to people. Like, I feel like we're shown him talking to Dave, right? And like explaining like, hey dude, you gotta like kind of chill out sometimes. Like, you're rubbing people the wrong way. And like even later on, like talking to Sharia and being like, hey, you're rubbing people the wrong way by the way that you're acting. Like, he's able to kind of play that middle guy and get people to appease each other, which I feel like that's a really good skill to have in the game.
I mean, he successfully does what Jean-Robert tries to do a minute later. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem with Frosty was I don't think he understood the strategic part of the game as much as the social part of the game. And I think that's what really does bite him a little bit and why we don't hear as much. Because China is one of the first really strategy heavy seasons of Survivor, because season 14 is kind of just whatever. Season 13, it's more of like, how are we going to get through this? How are we going to make the comeback? But this season is very much strategy. It's starting to get to that point. It'll never hit the point that season 40, season 39, 38, 37 are at, but it's starting to get to that point where a lot of it is talk around idols and who do we give this to? Who should we kidnap? Who's in my alliance? Who's kind of on the periphery? Who, as we'll see in the next episode, what 2 players do we steal? Like, it becomes very, very strategy heavy and good, because it works. And it's not an overabundance of idols or anything like that. It starts to become a problem in season 19. So that's why we all look back on China as like the glory days, one of the last of the glory days.
Which I would love to see one of the stealing twists come back. I feel like that's just a really fun way to get different tribe interaction without necessarily having a tribe swap. Like, you're building cross-tribal connections without having to totally switch everything up. And I feel like, I don't know if they've done that. I can't remember if they've done that a different time, but
that might be the last time they did it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, they do that really weird summit during Millennials versus Gen X, but there's a way to do it without, because the thing is, I feel like if they did that now, people would almost forget that it happened and find a way to be annoyed with it. But I think a really safe way to do it is to steal people in between the reward and the immunity challenge. Taking someone during an immunity challenge, I think that's a good twist, but I see why that would bother some people. But I think, like, and you said you're showing your kids token chains too. That is like so close to having the coolest alliance ever.
Yeah, the Exile Island.
On Exile Island, and that's something that we just don't really get the opportunity to even see something like that anymore. And I think those are simple, good twists that just further the social part of the experiment.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm rewatching Pearl Islands right now, and I just got up to the finale, and that season has a lot of kidnap. And it's a bummer that they don't do that anymore, because Jeff always said the best thing for Survivor was when you could get interaction between people. As long as interaction between people, there'd be drama, there'd be something to do. I don't know why they backed off from that. It feels like they stopped doing interaction between people and started doing interaction between objects. And Alexa and I talk about this in our Patron podcast when we talk about we compare the Sarah boot in Cagayan to the Breath First Search tribal council with Bing in Survivor Dave vs. Goliath. And what you realize rewatching both of those is the Sarah one is all human interaction. There's idols and stuff like that, but it's all the chaos of the people. In the other one, it's very much like, here's an idol. Here's an idol nullifier. Here's like, and it starts to lose its feeling, because it's like, well, why not just not have a nullifier and an idol? Just have the steal a vote. Like, you didn't need both those things. And so it's really sad that they don't go back to kind of just these human, steal a player, see how they interact with the new tribe. Does that cause chaos for people? Does that make people worried? Like, I wish they would just do some of that again. I don't know why they don't.
Now that we have the fire tokens, if that would be something where like you steal somebody from the tribe and that person has to give somebody on that tribe a fire token now.
Yeah. I know. That could be a cool idea. I mean, like just something, or like they could buy something off of somebody, or they could give somebody tokens for something that they don't even like. I don't know. It's just, they got to go back to just those little moments, because that's what made Survivor, not the, like nowadays, everything happens at Tribal Council. Everything that takes place in Survivor is determined at Tribal Council. Blindside, idle play, steal a vote, extra vote, all of that. There's nothing really happening in the first 30 minutes of an episode anymore. There'll be talk, but it's, did they find an idol that they can then play at Tribal Council? Like the first 30 minutes don't mean anything anymore. And I get you want to end on a bang every week if you possibly can, but how can you make it so that the build up to it is these little moments that don't necessarily have the biggest impact on Tribal, but Dave being pulled away from his tribe, Morgan, I agree with what you said earlier. It probably is a reason why he goes home, because they all got to experience what life without Dave would be like. And it was probably freaking awesome.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
We'll have to send that to somebody. Those are good ideas.
Yeah. I'll call my guy. I'll call Jeff on the Jeff phone. I got him. Don't worry about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Morgan, any closing thoughts on the season, on the episode? What's something you want to get out that we haven't mentioned? We dissected this episode pretty well, I'd say.
Yeah. I feel like the only thing that we haven't talked about is how crazy those fishing birds were.
Yes.
From the reward.
That they trained?
Just like tying its throat so it can't talk.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And everyone is like, oh yeah, that makes, like, I watched that. I was like, oh, I've never thought of that before.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
But other than that, I think we've pretty much covered everything.
Yeah.
Oh, Sharia had the episode title.
She's gonna ride the horse's tail until ride the horse till the tails fall off. I think she
something
twirled
like
the
that.
tail or something. Yeah. No, it was it's a good episode, and again, like this season just keeps building. It's like every episode gets better than the next, and it gets better than the next, and it gets better than the next, and the next one pisses everybody off, but it's so good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And by the way, somebody had said in here, we never mentioned Aaron once. We pretty much didn't. It was like one time we accidentally brought him up.
Hello,
and
Aaron.
Hello, Aaron. We'll be talking about you much more next week. Don't worry. Poor guy.
He'll be fine. We'll chat about him next week.
Yeah,
he'll survive.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Morgan, it was amazing having you on. This was a lot of fun. Maybe you can tell everybody what makes our Patreon group so great.
Well, I mean, I started watching you guys, I would say a couple years ago now. I want to say like David versus Goliath, Edge of Extinction era. And I just really love the content from like a fan perspective, and being part of the patron group. Like, we are truly a group of super fans who all just love the show and love talking about Survivor, and, you know, what's your favorite season? Who's your favorite player? And we get to do lots of cool stuff, like coming on and talking about Survivor with you guys. Like, this was awesome, and I've been looking forward to it ever since you guys asked me. So things like power rankings and daily content in the Patreon. So yeah, it's awesome.
It's been really cool seeing, because I feel like this only happened within, like, I would say the past 6 months or so, but seeing like, okay, like you get to be a part of this Facebook group, but seeing like you guys actually interact. And like last night, I think I saw Ian sent a Zoom, like people, like you guys were like playing your own separate game, like actually just like genuinely hanging out with each other. And I was like, that's really cool that everyone's been able to do that. So thanks for coming on, and thanks for being a patron. This has been a ton of fun. We're really glad you're enjoying it.
No, thanks for everything you guys do. It's awesome.
And we have a big week next week. We have no times yet, so Phil and I will have to have a conversation. But next week we are talking about Mulan, which is our next movie. We're watching the 1990s Mulan, not the live action that was just dropped a few weeks ago. So make sure to tune into that. We'll be recapping our 5th episode of Survivor China with a TBD guest. And then actually before that is the season premiere of The Amazing Race, which Phil and I are diving back into. The Amazing Casuals will be back. So make sure to tune into that. We're going to do that right after the episode. I believe it premieres at 9 p.m. Eastern. And then we'll go back to its normal 8 o'clock time slot after that. So we'll be podcasting right after that and recapping China episode 5. So you will get a good 2 hours of us next Wednesday night. Phil, am I missing anything?
I think that's it. Become a patron. $20 patrons are getting daily content. Morgan put her finger up, which means we're not done yet.
All right, we're ending on this.
Some of us who are patrons just competed in the ORG against the TRHS patron group, and those episodes are going to start coming out tomorrow, I believe, is the premiere episode. So you can look for that on their YouTube page. So it'll be fun to watch those episodes back.
Yeah.
And let the predictions begin. Would Morgan be plugging this if she didn't do well?
Ooh, spoiler.
Just an idea.
You'll have to watch and find out. I don't know.
There you go.
Stay tuned, everybody. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thanks again for